morning, gentlemen. I'm going to today talk to you about a different topic, something which is going to interest a lot of people. I'm going to talk about the royal dynasties while focusing basically on the Shah of Iran in the Middle East. Whatever happened to the Shah of Iran could very well happen to other people also, and it did happen in Iraq also, where the entire dynasty was wiped out in a coup d'etat in 1958 led by Lieutenant General Qasim. Now, the Shah of Iran had something given to him on a platter. I mean, he was not a dynasty which has lasting for any length of time. And basically, the Shah, the last Shah, his father, was the man who established the dynasty. He was basically a soldier who joined the Iranian army and rose up in the ranks and became a general. And then he decided, on instigation from the British and even the Russians, that they should depose the earlier Shah. And he did that in 1919 and established his own dynasty, which we call the Pahlavi dynasty. Unfortunately, this dynasty lasted only 58 years, and after that, they had to flee Iran. But we must understand the reasons why this happened, and the other monarchies and the dynasties which are still in existence must take a lesson and adjust their lifestyle and other things accordingly. Egypt also, if you remember, in 1952 had a military revolution in which a man called Colonel Nasser took over, and the king of Egypt, Farouk, was exiled. He, I think, went away to Italy or something like that. But the point I'm coming to, basically, the Shah of Iran. The Shah of Iran, the father of the present, the last Shah rather, actually wanted to usher in a type of government like the one in Turkey, and his ideal actually was Kemal Atatürk. He had thought that he'll bring about a change in society, but the Majlis, that is the Iranian parliament, didn't accept it, and they insisted that he become the Shah, and he became the Shah. And from that time till he was deposed in 1954, he basically ruled in a form of democracy in Iran. But in 1954, the Americans and the British were pretty upset with this Shah, because he had nationalized the oil companies, and they were keen to look for somebody who should come out. And so they carried out, the CIA rather carried out a coup in Tehran, which installed Reza Shah as the ruler of Iran. The prime minister at that time, who was a pro-nationalist man, was sent to oblivion. Gentlemen, the Shah himself came with the support of the Western world, and obviously he was enamored of the Western world, and he wanted to enforce the same sort of culture which is there in Western Europe in Iran. Now, Iran is a pretty conservative society, and you can't just superimpose something there. But this is precisely what he wanted to do, and that was his undoing. And in the process, he should have taken the people along with him. He didn't do that. More or less, he himself led a very colorful life. I think he had 3 wives. The first was the Princess of Egypt, Fawzia. She was, I think, the sister of King Farouk, who ruled Egypt at that time. But she was never happy with the Shah, and she felt that the Iranian culture was very inferior to what she had in Egypt. And though she had a daughter, she headed back to Egypt, divorced the Shah, and later on she found love, in the sense she married another man and lived happily ever after. But as far as the Shah is concerned, I think he didn't know what to do. Ultimately, there was a daughter of an Iranian nobleman, and her name was Soraya, and he married her. He was in love with her. But here again, fate played a cruel part in the sense it was proved that medically she could not conceive, and the Shah was desperate for her heir, and as that also his son, because his first marriage had only resulted in a daughter, had to divorce her. I think he went on TV, told his people, and almost cried. But then that's part of the game, and finally the Shah in 1959 was introduced to another young student with an Iranian girl who was studying in Paris, and he decided that she would be his wife, and they married. And she remained with him till he died, and she had 4 children from him, including the present pretender, the crown prince. Now, the Shah had a great opportunity given to him in 1954 to try to improve the lot of the Iranian people. That was something we should have done. But during his regime, the rich became richer and the poor remained where they were. And secondly, he tried to enforce alien culture on Iran by bringing in Western dress, giving freedom to the women. These are all good points, but they were not liked. And more or less, there was an opposition to his regime, and he was very brutal on those people in the sense that many of his opponents were just executed. I think one of the methods of execution was to take a dissident in an aeroplane or a helicopter up and then just tie his hand and throw him down from say 3,000 to 4,000 feet, and that was the end of that poor man. So the clergy was against him, against the Shah, because they felt he was sacrilegious and he had supported the Americans, whom they considered to be the great Stalin. But gentlemen, the situation was that Iran is a very important place, very has a geopolitical importance. And right from 1918, when the Russian Revolution took place, the Americans, the Western world, the British and the French were looking for a way out to attack Russia through Iran. They had requested the Iranians to allow them to attack to overthrow the Russian Revolution so they could restore the Tsar back to his throne. They failed, and Russia occupied Iran, the northern portion. Then later on, of course, after World War II, they left Iran to their own whims and fancies. The Pahlavi dynasty had very grandiose ideas. In fact, Shah was celebrating his coronation with big parades, dances, and whatnot, and claiming that he was heading the heritage of the earlier Zoroastrian dynasties. But at the same time, he was a man who was devoid of any understanding of the geopolitical situation in the world. And he was more and more an autocrat, dependent on the Americans for everything. Now, the downfall of the Shah must be seen in one light, that he relied too much on the Americans, and it would be a good idea that the other dynasties which are in power now don't rely totally on the Americans, because the Americans cannot pull your chestnuts out of the fire. There's no way they can do that. They lost everywhere, and they lost in the Shah. And then they also treated the Shah very badly. Later I'll tell you now. Anyway, the Shah continued in his way, and in 1965, when there was a war between India and Pakistan, he went on the side of Pakistan and said that he would send his air force to support Pakistan. But before he could do anything silly, the war was over, and the Pakistanis sued for peace. So, gentlemen, the point I'm coming to is that the Iranian dynasty was doomed by its own failure. Instead of trying to make an egalitarian approach to life, try to improve the lot of the people, he was most interested in window dressing, wherein he wanted to emancipate the woman overnight. He didn't go about the way Kemal Atatürk did, and Atatürk is a great revered man in Turkey, but Iran the Shah is the most hated man. So there's a contrast between the two. And the Shah, in any case, didn't achieve anything during his reign in power. He was in power, actually, the Shah till 78, and early 70s, the situation against him had started deteriorating. In the 71 war, I think he again wanted to come on the side of Pakistan or something like that, and he couldn't do it. And ultimately, he was more concerned about his throne, about his own life, because a violent revolution began to sweep Iran. Now, gentlemen, he had a wonderful queen, her name was Faradiba, whom, as I told you, he married in 1959, had 4 children. But this lady was not the right material. She thought she would emancipate the Iranian woman by window dressing, getting a few women down in western dresses and all that. But the lot of the women in the villages didn't improve. And the Shah continued to become more and more autocratic. Autocracy is a good thing because that's been practiced all over the world. You must remember, in India there were almost 500 states and 500 kings, and they were all autocrats. But they are now only a footnote in history. And we know that the dynasties of Iraq and also of Egypt were overthrown by military coups. I don't think there's any existence about them now. And the Iran also, the same thing happened. The Iranian revolution now began to sweep the country, and the Shah did not know what to do. He thought he would enforce martial law in all the cities and get away with it. But then when you have no grassroots support, because he had not tried to build up any support among the people, and the credit, I thought, should have been like the way the dynasties of Saudi Arabia and the UAE are functioning. I mean, they have the ear to the ground, these dynasties, and a lot of the people had improved there. While in Iran it was the reverse. The Shah was in his own world, and he thought he's having some grandiose schemes, supporting people here and there, and living a lavish and opulent lifestyle while his people were in penury. And then he was doing something on his own without taking the people into confidence. He wanted to modernize the country, but the way he chose was totally wrong. The Iranian army and the few of the elite were trying to back him, but even in the Iranian army there were a lot of dissidents, and finally the revolution broke out in 78. He didn't have the stomach to stay in Tehran and face, and he told his relations to leave Iran and Tehran, and they left and went away. And he also flew out in 78. Now the Shah later on was tried in absentia and sentenced to death by the Iranian people who took over, and one of them was Ayatollah Khamenei, who had been one of the strong opponents of the Shah of Iran. Gentlemen, the Shah of Iran fate is a lesson to various people. It could be anybody who's a ruler, who's a despot, that you have to have your ear to the ground, number one. Number two, you have to improve the lot of the people. If you don't do that, you're just going to the dustbin of history, and that is what happened. And secondly, you have to relinquish some power and to the people also. The democracies like Japan and England, even the Netherlands, they have constitutional monarchy and they don't have any power. This is just a sidelight which I'm giving, and they have survived, though I don't know how long they're going to survive further. Now, as far as the Shah is concerned, he burnt his bridges completely with the people, and though he did try to bring in modernization, but he forgot that in the villages there's a deep-rooted prejudice, and people are very devout. I mean, in their own way, they don't want to modernize, and it was anathema to them that all the modernization and the modern dresses and all with the Iranian women wearing was coming up here and there. So, gentlemen, the Iran, he had to flee, and then the sad part is that this Shah could not get a place to stay anywhere in any country. Even the Americans, as I told you, can't rely on them. They did not give him any succor, any rest. In fact, they insisted that he not stay in Iran, though at that in USA, though at that time he was seriously ill. And that is, I think, a black mark on the Americans. And why they did it was because there were threats from Iran that they would take action against America in case America helped the Shah. And the Shah had been there alive for a quarter of a century, and they dumped him like a sack of potatoes. And this is the sad part of the American way of working. America thought that they could ingratiate themselves with the new regime if they didn't support the Shah. But this was the period when the famous diplomatic incident took place when the American embassy staffers were taken hostage by the Iranian revolution. It was very sad, and it showed that America is having no say at all in the world. It showed that America was like, Gulliver, who was tied by small Lilliputians and couldn't move. He was a giant, basically, compared to the Lilliputians. Gentlemen, the point I'm coming again and again is that any regime which has to survive, continue, must have its ear to the ground, not live in a grander scheme, and not try to do something which the people don't want. You bring the people along with you, take them with you. Now, I have been to Kazakhstan, and which is Islamic state, basically 70% of the population is Islamic, but there's no trace of Islam there at all. In the interest or manner of food or something, there are bars, there are nightclubs. You got to live with the people, bring them up, and that's what they've done. I didn't see a single woman in a burqa there. But everything has been done in a different way. The Shah was trying to have some shortcuts, and shortcuts don't work. Either he should have followed Ataturk, he didn't do that. He wanted to be a total autocrat himself, and then all the dissidents were executed. He thought he would continue, but it didn't happen. And ultimately, he had a sad end. No country was prepared to give him refuge or any place to stay, and he had finally, it's a credit to President Anwar Sadat that he gave him a place to stay, and he died in Cairo. Sad on his wife, the Queen, and the 4 children he left behind, which also had a tragic end. 2 of the children, I think, died pretty early. One committed overdose of drugs, and the daughter committed suicide. So that's the curtain has come down on history, on a dynasty which was given by God to rule Iran, and they frittered all the chances, everything away. Gentlemen, I hope you like this short video, and it's a tragedy that something similar happened in Iraq much earlier, in 1958. I think the Shah should have drawn lessons from there, and then of course he should have even watched how King Farouk was removed in Egypt by a small coterie of officers of the Egyptian army led by Colonel Nasser. But he didn't see the war clouds hovering. He didn't see anything. He saw only his own grandiose schemes and his own ego, and he thought he was one of the greatest monarchs as far as Iran was concerned, which he was not, and ultimately he paid the price of oblivion and of being damned in history as a man who totally destroyed Iran. I'll close now, gentlemen. I hope you like this video. Share it with your friends. At the same time, please spread the word and do look after yourself. Take care. God bless.